I'm a second-year student. The tiny room I rented in the dorm ate almost all of my stipend. The side jobs were only enough for food and bus fare. I got used to counting coins, to the constant hum of other people's voices behind the wall, and to the idea that the future is always later. When the notary called, I first took it for spam. Short, dry, your grandfather has died, there's an apartment in a small town, ground floor, you can move in while the inheritance is processed. I barely knew my grandfather. Saw him a couple of times as a kid, quiet, stooped. He smelled of tobacco and pharmacy. In the family, they called him strange, but not unkind. I agreed immediately. Every coin matters. A hostel? No. Something of my own, even if old? Yes. I learned about his death from the neighbors talking by the entrance when I arrived. Everyone spoke softly, as if the courtyard could hear. They'd found him about 2 weeks earlier. First, there was a sweet, damp smell in the stairwell, something overripe. On the second day, a woman from the first floor called building management. The old man must have a leak. They forced the door. He was lying in the corridor, right across from the metal storage room. His face looked like he was sleeping, only his eyes hadn't closed. On the steel door were streaks of rust, smeared by palms. On the floor, fine wood shavings, as if something sharp had been worrying at a board. His nails were broken short, under them dark dust and a few slimy threads of insulation from an old lock. The hatch in the storage floor was ajar. No one who came in at that moment wanted to look down. They slammed the door and sealed the apartment. Heart gave out, they said later. The apartment met me with silence and the smell of damp plaster. The wallpaper ballooned at the corners. The linoleum swelled in places. The enamel on the stove had flaked away. In the hallway, that storage room, an oddly heavy steel door with stiffening ribs like a cellar. The hinges were freshly greased, the lock old, brass, polished by fingers. I rattled the key ring. One fit. Inside, a half step of concrete, and in the floor, a square hatch with an iron ring. The neighbor across the hall caught me almost at once, just as I took out the trash. Thin, straight-backed, thick gray hair twisted into a coil. She didn't look at my eyes. She looked at the keys in my hand. "You're the grandson?" She said it like a statement. I nodded. "Keep the hatch shut. At night, especially. If you hear anything, don't open it. And lock the storage door for the night. 2 full turns." She said it evenly, not in a whisper, like an instruction. "What's down there?" I wanted to ask, but without waiting for the question, she slammed her door, leaving me alone with myself and with the feeling that the stairwell had turned colder. During the day, I unpacked my bag, wiped the dust, found a blanket in a cabinet that smelled of cheap detergent. Around 6, I decided to look into the storage. It's silly to be afraid of your own apartment. The lock turned stiffly. The steel squealed and buzzed in my palms. I opened the door, switched on my phone's flashlight, and lifted the hatch. The smell hit immediately. Earth, salt water, old herbal dust. I set my feet on a flimsy wooden ladder. The cellar was shallow. You couldn't stand up straight. Earthen walls with handprints pressed into the damp layer here and there, as if someone had packed it down. Around the perimeter, shelves of rough, unplaned boards nailed together in a hurry, bricks shoved under in places. On the shelves, empty jars with faded lids, a couple swollen and cloudy with threads of dill floating inside. One jar had shattered. The glass was cracked. The sharp brine had soaked into the dirt floor and left a dark stain. In the corner lay a length of cord tied in a knot. Next to it, an old kettle with a broken handle. On the wall at shoulder height, I saw 5 parallel grooves in the wet clay, like scratches, but not sharp, more like fingers had slid and raked. Somewhere in a corner you could hear dripping, slow, lazy drops. I climbed back up quickly. The little ladder creaked under me, as if it wouldn't survive another night. The hatch slammed, The lock clicked. I raised my shoulders as if shaking off a shiver and said out loud, "Normal Keller, nothing special." My voice sounded like someone else's. First night. At first, I listened to the pipes in the fridge. Then I stopped. I was already slipping into sleep when a sound came from the hallway, metallic, thin, as if the iron ring of the hatch had lightly tapped the lid and gone still. I sat up, listened. Quiet. Seconds stretched. Then, barely there, a scrape on metal, like a fingernail across a keyhole. I walked to the bedroom door and stopped. I stood there for a long time before realizing I'd been holding my breath. At 3:17 by my alarm, the sound came again. 3 dull knocks from below, like a palm on a wooden step. I had thoughts, but not one of them suggested going to check what was happening down there. I sat like that until morning, shoes on, watching the crack under the door. When it got light, I fell asleep on the couch with the lamp still on. The second morning began with voices in the stairwell, doors slamming, hurried steps, someone calling 911. I looked into the hall. The door across from me was wide open. 2 people went into the neighbor's apartment, a female medic and a man with a case. Her storage room was the same as mine. Its door was stood open, the padlock lay on the floor nearby. I didn't see much. No one called me closer, and I didn't want to go, but I caught a glimpse. She lay on her side in the corridor, hands tucked in, mouth slightly open, gaze toward her storage. On the jamb, traces of nails, vertical lines, and on the floor by her hatch, a wet, dark stain. Someone said, "Same as the old man." A police officer asked my name, where I'd been at night, whether I'd heard anything. I answered briefly. I heard knocking and nothing else. I didn't want to mention the Keller weirdness. What if he thought I was crazy? He nodded, wrote it down, explained nothing. All day I walked the apartment like a museum I didn't want to see, pretended to read, went out to buy a new padlock, heavy, thick shackle. Back home, I inspected my storage. The hatch in the floor was bowed upward, as if from a hard blow from underneath. I froze. My fingers squeezed the bag with the lock until the plastic squeaked. I quickly hung the new lock over the old. Let there be 2. The second night arrived without sleep. I sat on the couch dressed, backpack at my feet. I left the hallway light on. At 2:30 came the first sound, a faint glass ring, as if a jar shivered somewhere. Then a second, closer. At 3:09, a scrape on metal. At 3:17, the same 3 dull blows. A draft slid under the door. The kitchen lamp gave a small tremor, and somewhere deep in the floor, a muffled sigh seemed to answer. I heard a quiet phrase, or thought I did. No intonation, like words repeated long ago. "Open." I didn't move. The clock was ticking strangely loud. You notice it most when you're listening for every sound. When it finally went quiet again, I made up my mind. In the morning, I would leave. The inheritance later. The keys to the notary. I wouldn't live here. I spent the third day mechanically. Wiped the table, stacked documents, turned off the fridge, poured out the kettle, checked the window, looked over the hallway once more. 2 locks on the storage, in place. I put the keys on the table by the front door, as I'd been asked. The stairwell smelled of damp and age. Not a single door stood open. The bus to the station came empty. I took a window seat and held my backpack against my legs. The wheels hummed, the town slid away, gray 5-story blocks with shedding facades, low trees, empty playgrounds. Only when I saw the sign that we're entering my city did I finally feel lighter.